you can always check our YouTube channel. After every monthly webinar, we normally upload all these recordings on the YouTube channel if you want to follow or just do a recap of our discussions. Kip Koril joining us from Westlands, Nairobi. Karibu sana. Karibu sana for, let me see who's joining us from. For Dumebi joining us from Lagos. Karibu sana means you're most welcome. That's a bit of Swahili. Most welcome, most welcome, most welcome. So for those of us who are joining us for the first time, my name is Martin Mwangi Kamethu. I'm a cybersecurity enthusiast and a technology enthusiast as well. I have been in the thank you, Tepe. Someone is joining us from the studio will join shortly as well. I have been in the cybersecurity space for close to 10 years now. I work with a company called Serianu, and I love all things mentorship, helping people walk the journey and transition to their cybersecurity career paths, or for those of us who are already in cybersecurity or in tech, make it a softer landing for you to continue becoming experts in your specific career paths that you have identified. So what we've been doing for the last close to 9-10 months so far this year, from February this year, we started a monthly podcast where we began to talk about cybersecurity career paths. And the goal of this was to help those of us who are in school identify their areas that they would like to focus on. And then for those of us who just transitioned from school and recently graduated, and you are unsure of which is a specific domain in cybersecurity that you want to focus on, these webinars are also for that purpose, to help you transition from school to the industry as well. And then thirdly, for those of us who are already working, you are already in the field, you are either in the technology space, you are into networking, you're into database, you're a programmer, you're a developer. These webinars that we've been holding all the way from February have also been to help us transition career-wise, either from a specific tech domain and have cybersecurity as one of your additional domains as well. And for those of us who would say, hey, I have been focused on a specific technology domain like networking, but I would like to continue, I would like to focus specifically on security. This is the reason why we do these webinars. So the bulk of what you'll find our discussions on from February, we've been hosting people who are experts in their own rights, in their areas, in security and also in tech. And the goal of that has been to get to appreciate what their journeys have been. And as we get to learn from them, their career journeys, we also get to understand the fundamentals or the foundational principles that we should focus on as we are building our careers in cybersecurity. So that has been the focus of our webinars so far. In June, in July, actually, we had a physical meetup. And I know some of us who are joining in today's webinar, we got to be part of that physical in-person meetup. We held that in Nairobi. And hopefully we can continue having those kind of sessions every so often so that we get some energy when we get to meet in person. So most welcome to today's session. Our focus of today is going to be on cloud security, and we'll get to learn from somebody who has been in that field, quite of an interesting transition from this Linux and Unix administration part of his career, and to see how that has slowly transitioned all the way to a cloud architect space. So most welcome. If you just joined us, you're most welcome again. You can chat, you can send a message on chat on where you're joining us from. And also, as we are starting as well, if you can also share on chat what your expectations for this session are, we'll be glad to get to appreciate that. So for those of us who are joining, all of us who are joined in, I hope that gives you an appreciation of what our focus has been, and what our focus continues to be as we help to mentor and shape cybersecurity careers. For anyone who is joining in, for anyone who is transitioning into cybersecurity, or for anyone who has already been in tech and wants to add some more security to what they're doing. I have been, you might have noticed there's some flashy screen that is being shared on the screen. This is a live threat map. It's by a company called Radware, I believe. Radware is a company that focuses on DDoS, and there are a lot of these different threat maps that you can find. There's a threat map by Kaspersky, threat map by Checkpoint. There's a threat map by Fortinet. There's a threat map by the Bitdefender as well. And these threat maps, what they do is that they deploy sensors across the globe, and different organizations will host these different sensors. You can also deploy these sensors on the cloud, and they help these organizations with a bit of research and to understand and appreciate what are the attacks that we are seeing from different parts of the world. And that intelligence is important because it helps them as providers understand how they can either prevent, detect, or even contain these attacks as they target different organizations. So feel free to check these out, even outside this webinar. All you need to type on your browser is Radware Live Threat Map. You can type that, Radware. There you go. If you Radware, type that again. It should go to everyone. There we go. So that should be Radware Live Threat Map, and that should give you the map of what you're seeing me displaying. And what you'll note on the left, we have got different options. So you can select or unselect specific attack types that you would want to see. You can decide, I want to only see anonymizers. Anonymizers are that's the bottom one. So anonymizers are specific applications that you can deploy to anonymize your activity on the internet. For example, if you're connected to a network and you don't want specific security technologies to see what you're doing on that network, it's possible for you to bypass certain technologies, security technologies, by connecting to anonymizers. So anonymizers are important for a security practitioner to know if they are anonymizers in a network, because what that means is that your users might be bypassing specific perimeter controls. Like they might try and bypass your firewall. So of course, for this as a user, for you, it's good because it might be good. And I say good in quotes because it helps, you're able to bypass specific controls. But what that means is that you might introduce malicious content onto the network. And that's why from a security research point, you will find that it's important to understand and identify anonymizers that might be on a network. So I've just checked the anonymizers option, and you can see currently we don't have any anonymizers live right now. It doesn't mean that there are none, but right now there are no anonymizers right now on the Radware threat map. So I can uncheck that and then check for scanners. And when I click check for scanners, you can see we have a lot of scanners. What this tells you is that there are a lot of scanners that are scanning activity forms the majority of attack activities that we see on the internet. immediately you deploy a cloud application and you deploy it on a cloud instance, or you've deployed it on your own environment and you give it a public IP address, what happens immediately is that there's a bot that has been configured to scan any new IP address on the internet. So this should not is not something new, but you should expect that any application, any system, any infrastructure, be it a router, be it a web server, you're launching an application on the web, on the cloud, you should expect that these applications will be scanned immediately. And what that means to us as security practitioners is that any application or infrastructure that is internet facing, there is already an attacker who is trying to scan it for vulnerabilities. And if they are trying to scan for vulnerabilities, then we should only launch applications and systems to the internet once we have configured and hardened them to prevent intruders from exploiting gaps that might identify. So scanning also is a very fast step of an attacker. The first thing they will do is that they will scan a network, they will scan a system, and after scanning, they will identify weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And those loopholes they find, they will then try different attack vectors, different ways that they might find available, or if there is none that is available, they will actually code and they will create malicious codes that can bypass those applications through the loopholes that have been identified in the scanning phase. So for those of us who have a bit of background in software engineering, you're a developer, you've done a bit of programming, that is a space that you can also focus on in terms of trying to see different scripts that you can develop. Of course, now not doing it as an attacker, but you can do it to simulate an attack, so that as you are simulating the attack, you can also come up with a way that you can detect or prevent the attacker. And that's the mindset that we who are security practitioners, or we who are envisioning to be security practitioners, I think that's how we should envision attack simulation. You should not just attack for the sake of attacking, but you should attack with a goal of defending. If you do it that way, you're on the right path. If you just break and attack networks for the sake of breaking and attacking them, then it beats the purpose. There should be a purpose to it, and the purpose of it is to identify a gap, identify a vulnerability, maybe even communicate to the company that has been affected. If you're doing it as a security researcher, where you are doing what we call bounty hunting, and then once you identify, you communicate to tell them, hey, I have identified a gap here. Could you fix it before a bad guy does it? And a lot of companies are now paying security researchers who identify bugs and gaps in their networks and applications. If you communicate and they can prove that you are the first person to identify, they're actually paying you a lot of money for that. And the likes of your Googles, your Facebooks, all these global companies have bounty hunting programs where they allow security researchers to break into their networks, but of course, but of course to disclose. You're not supposed to go to the public. You're supposed to inform the company first. And what they do, they normally come up with a fix first, and then they can now go to the public and tell the public, please note that a certain operating system has an issue. But here is a fix that we have that is available, and that is what we call responsible disclosure. If you identify a vulnerability or a bug in a public system, hopefully you will inform the company first before you can go to the public and post that on Twitter, or now X, or post it on LinkedIn. Responsible disclosure is when we inform the affected organization first before we can inform the public. Right, so that was on scanners. Then you will also note on the left as well, I have unselected scanners and selected intruders. So you'll also note for intruders, is an attack type as well. So Radware is also monitoring for intruders. So intruders have gone past the scanning phase, and they are now trying to run malicious code that can exploit the weaknesses that have already been identified by the scanner. So that's what you're seeing. The activity you're seeing currently on the screen is by intrusion scripts. Somebody is running a script somewhere. Somebody has identified a malicious or a vulnerable website. It's running WordPress. They have gone on the web, they have scanned it, they have found that there is a vulnerability. They have gone on the web as well. They have looked for available exploits that can bypass that vulnerability, and they're actually running it on the world. So if that is happening, and there's a sensor by Radware to capture that activity, that is what is showing up here. Let's see what we have for denial of service attacks. Denial of service attacks, we don't have any that are showing up now. If there are any, they will show up with yellow. Let's see whether we have any web attackers. Yes, we have plenty of them. Plenty of web attack activities. And if you have any questions as we proceed, please feel free to send your question on chat. Just setting the foundation of our webinar today, as we are starting with what I'd shared. For those of us who have just joined in, it was giving a foundation of different paths that we take. Those of us who are pursuing careers in cybersecurity, there are different domains that you can decide to pursue. And based on the activity that we are seeing on the screen, this is a live threat map. It's by a company called Radware, but there are a lot of different threat maps that you can find online. If you search for threat map by Radware, you're going to find this, whatever I'm displaying on the screen. If you search for Bitdefender threat map, you'll also find they have a threat live map. If you find for Kaspersky, you'll find one by Kaspersky. You can find one by Fortinet. You can find one by Checkpoint as well. And all these threat map, what they do is that they deploy sensors. And after deploying sensors on the globe, either on the cloud or on a specific organization, once they deploy those sensors, they are able to detect what attackers are doing. Now, those specific sensors are an interesting area in cybersecurity called honeypots. So this is an area that you can also decide to focus on doing threat intelligence and identifying what attackers are doing. And honeypots are systems that are intentionally vulnerable. So you can think, if you would find some, if you are an attacker and you connect to a network and you find a folder called payroll, employee salary, as an attacker, that's something that you want to open. But sometimes that is a honeypot, a vulnerable file that has been left by a security researcher, intentionally left on a network, and it's waiting for an attacker. So it's like honey, and it's waiting for bees to come. And once they land, they attack. The researcher or the security practitioner or the security defender now knows what the attacker is looking for. So security researchers deploy honeypots all over the world on different platforms, either on a cloud platform or an on-premise platform. And then what they will do, the way a honeypot has been configured and created, is that it opens up certain ports or certain windows that attackers normally look for. So if you remember the scanning activity, let me enable the scanners. You can see all this scanning activity. This scanning activity, these scanners are looking for different services and ports. Before I attack an organization, the first thing I want to know is there available an open port or a doorway that I can go through, and what is running on that application. So those are the two things that an attacker will look for. Is there a service or a port that I can target? Now, globally, if you have done some networking and application knowledge, you will you know that there are specific there are specific ports and services that are normally vulnerable. They're not bad, but by the nature of the way the services they expose, they are very attractive to attackers. And some of them are port 25. If I find port 25, anyone who knows what port 25 runs on? Port 25, if you can type on chat, what does port 25 run on? What service runs on port 25? What service runs on port 25? Anyone who wants to give it a try? File transfer protocol. Eric, not really. SMTP, correct. Vincent, SMTP is correct. SMTP stands for SMTP. Charles, Alvin, good stuff, good stuff. Now back to what Eric, you had responded with FTP, that is file transfer protocol. Anyone who can tell us what file transfer protocol, the port that FTP runs on? FTP is a service. It runs on which port? Port 21. Monica, thank you, good stuff. Eugene, thank you. So FTP, remember that. If you're hearing FTP for the first time, know that FTP is a file transfer protocol. It runs on port 21. Also, you now know that port 25, the service that runs on it is SMTP. There's another port. There's another service. There's a service that runs on a port called port 23. Anyone who can tell us what runs on port 23? Port 23? Telnet. That is Monica, you got it right. That is Telnet. Port 3 is a mail protocol. So that is the one that is running on 23 is Telnet. What is which port, or rather which service runs on port 22? Which service runs on port 22? SSH, good stuff. That is Monica, you got it right. Maureen, you got it right. Vincent, correct. That is SSH. I hope you're not Googling and ChatGPT. I hope these are coming. These are just random answers based on the knowledge that you have. Zephaniah, correct. Brian, SSH. Anyone who can tell us, there's a service that runs on port 5900. 5900. Which service runs on 5900? I can already see people who are Googling. 5900. Which service runs on port 5900? Which service runs on 5900? Anyone who's done some Linux, Unix administration should know this. TCP, UDP, but on which service? There's a specific service. Remote frame, Samuel Oyo, you're close. 5900. There's a service that runs on 5900. Which one is that? RDP. We're going to come back to RDP, Charles. Not really RDP, but actually it does, the service that runs on 5900 is a remote connection service. There's an application that uses port 5900. VNC, let's give a virtual clap for Alvin and Njogu. Chris Njogu, correct. You guys got it correct. VNC is a service that, and a clap for you. Let's give you a virtual clap. Where are the claps? Here we go. There we go. All right. So VNC, and what we're doing now, we are appreciating that an attacker, any attacker who connects to a network, they don't just do it randomly. An attacker will connect to a network, but they will know what they're looking for. They're either looking for port 25 for a service we've called SMTP, or they're looking for, are there any files that are being transferred on this network? And the service they will be looking for is port FTP service on port 21. We've also talked about port 23 that runs on that runs a service we call Telnet. Now, if you are running Telnet, or if an attacker finds Telnet on your network, now that's not a good thing, because Telnet is a remote administration protocol that allows network administrators to connect remotely to their devices. But the way they do it is, the way the data is transmitted is on plain text. So if you can sniff in between, you are actually able to see the data in plain text. So if you find Telnet port 23 active on a router or a switch or a firewall, though that is good news for an attacker, but that is bad news for the person, for the engineer who manages that network. So we've talked of VNC. VNC is a service that uses VNC is a service that administrators use to connect to Unix servers and administer those servers. So if you want to connect remotely to a Unix device, you can do it through VNC service. Now, the thing is, a lot of administrators forget to turn off VNC. So it's possible for you to find a default open VNC session on a web server. And hopefully this is not a web server that is publicly accessible. So you can imagine you've just built your house, but then there is no wall around your house, and the window to your bedroom is actually open by default. So what that means is anyone who is just walking around can peep, and if they find money, they can just jump in. So that's what normally happens for a lot of networks and systems and applications. They are configured, but most often than not, a lot of the administrators forget to disable default services, default ports, change default usernames and passwords, and even change default configurations, and also change services that are by default vulnerable and change them to the more secure services. So please take note of that the likes of your VNC, the likes of your SMTP, the likes of your Telnet, the likes of your SSH, these are not really services that are vulnerable in that they are bad to use, or using them would be wrong in a network, not necessarily. Of course, with the exemptions of the Telnet. Telnet is right now a legacy protocol. Legacy means that if you're using it, there is a better protocol that you can use instead of using Telnet, and that is SSH. So if you're using Telnet, you want to transition that to SSH, because SSH on port 22 does the same job, but instead of it transmitting that data on plain text, that data is being encrypted as it is being transmitted. Now, a few more protocols and services and ports for us to explore. Anyone who can tell us what runs on port? Who can tell us the port that the service RDP runs on? RDP is a remote desktop protocol. What port does it run on? What port does that service run on? RDP, 3389, that is good stuff. That was Samuel, Anthony, Muthoni, Bethley, good stuff. That is 3389. Is 3389 a bad thing? No, it's not, but it can be a bad thing. And it's one of those ports that you're seeing on this scanner. Right now, we've enabled the scanners option, and we are seeing globally, as per Radware's live threat map, a lot of the largest percentage of attack activity globally is scanning. Anything that you put online is being scanned automatically. And what are attackers looking for? They are looking for, do you have port 22? Do you have port 21? Do you have port 23? And also, do you have port 3389? So you don't want to just publish 3389, because what that means is that if 3389 is open, it means that I can connect to that server from anywhere globally. And I might not have the username and password. Of course, if I try connect, it's going to ask me for username and password. But of course, I can continue trying to brute force as one of the attack vectors and try as many username and password combinations as possible until I'm able to get the specific username and password that you're using. Is that possible? Yes, it is possible. Does it take time? That is relative. It depends on the strength of the password, the complexity. Those are some of the things that determine the how easy or how hard a brute force attack takes. So that is port 3389 on RDP service. Anyone who can tell us which port runs the MSQL, MySQL? There's a database, MySQL database. Anyone who knows this, the port that database is running? No, that is MySQL, not MSSQL, MySQL database. Anthony, you're very close, actually. You're very close. Maureen, good stuff. That is port 3306. 3306. So look at the activity. Look at all these scanners that we are seeing globally. A lot of scanning activity is happening across Africa, Asia, Europe, the US, Australia. Somebody from Australia is trying to scan a server in Africa. Somebody in Africa, in Kenya, in South Africa is trying to scan a server in Singapore. Somebody in the US is trying to scan a server in Asia. What are they looking for? They are looking for RDP, as we say. They are looking for SMTP. They are looking for port FTP. They're looking for FTP service, and they also want to see whether they can do SQL injections. But for them to do SQL injections, they need to know whether there is a database service that is running. And if they find that the 306 port, they know, aha, this is very likely these guys they must have MySQL database. Which port will they need to scan for them to find MS SQL database? That is Microsoft database. MS SQL, which port do they need to scan? Or rather, which port runs on MS SQL? 1433, Anthony, Bethany, good stuff, that is correct. 1433 is a port that runs the MS SQL database. Anyone who knows a port that runs Oracle database? What port does the Oracle database service run on? Which port is that? Which port is that? We're just taking time to understand. These are the basics. If you're going to become a very good cybersecurity practitioner who helps organizations prevent and detect and even secure their infrastructure, these are the fundamentals that you should know on your fingertips. So if you find some of these ports, Bethany, that is 1521, that is correct. 1521, so you think about the databases, 3306 is your MySQL, 1433 is your MS SQL, and 1521 is your Oracle database service. These are important services to note. So we've talked of database services. We have talked of remote management protocols. Those are very good services for an attacker. The first thing they will want to see, is there an RDP service that is running? Can I find FTP? Can I find SSH running? Now, I want to take us back. We talked of FTP service. FTP is file transfer protocol. And we say that file transfer protocol, it runs on port 21. Port 21. Now, FTP is by default vulnerable. It's vulnerable because it transmits data in plain text. If you are sitting between the sender and the receiver, you can intercept that traffic, what we call a man-in-the-middle attack. The question I have for us is, which is the alternative protocol that you should be using, if not FTP, to transfer files within a network? Felix. That was very quick. Anthony, SFTP. Felix, that was SSH. You are not wrong, actually. FTP through over SSH is what we call SFTP. So SFTP is Secure File Transfer Protocol, is FTP by SSH. Good stuff. So Alvin, correct on that as well. So please take note of this. If you are if your goal is to transition to cybersecurity, or this is a space that you're already in, as you're seeing all these scanners that we are seeing, scanning activity on the screen, these are scanning activity by attackers who are looking for vulnerable services. And this is just a list of some of the services that they are looking for. This list is wide. If you go online and just type default vulnerable services, you'll find them. Now, some additional ports. Which port runs on a service, or rather, which service runs on a port 80? Port 80. Which service runs on port 80? HTTP. Good stuff. HTTP. That is correct. And HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And which service runs on port 443? Port 443. 443. That was who? Bethri. Anyone who has responded to the HTTPS, that is correct. HTTPS. Samuel Hira, glad to see you joining. Anyone who has responded. Now, the S at the end of the HTTP, is secure. So if you have HTTPS, you want to be running your application. Those of us who are developers, you're developers, and whether you're doing a school project, you're doing your final year project at school, or you're actually in the industry, and you're developing applications and systems and platforms, you want to ensure that anything that is running on the web has an SSL certificate, which ensures that it is communicating via HTTPS protocol and not HTTP. So all the plain text protocols, right now we've talked about vulnerable protocols. So we want to list them now. Let's start with the vulnerable protocols that transmit data on plain text. Anyone who wants to type something, one of the protocols that transmits data on plain text, keep them coming now. We have talked about a telnet, correct, Alvin? That is correct. Telnet is one of them. FTP, that is correct, Maureen. HTTP, FTP, telnet. Fatal Muthoni, that is correct. FTP, HTTP, telnet. Those are ports that you want to be careful. If you find that you are using these ports on a network, you want to transition them to the secure versions of these protocols. The secure version of HTTP, we have said, is which one? We said the secure version of HTTP should be which protocol? All you're doing is typing your answer on chat. HTTPS, correct, Charles. HTTPS is the secure version of HTTP, which is a secure version of FTP. FTP, which is a secure version of FTP protocol. SFTP, correct. SFTP is a correct version, which is a secure version of HTTP, which is the secure version of Telnet, which is a secure version of Telnet. The secure version of Telnet. Secure version of Telnet, correct. Zephaniah, Maureen, Esther, you're most welcome. Lebokang, you're most welcome. SSH, correct, is a secure version of Telnet. So if you are using Telnet protocol, you want to stop using that. Or if you are a security practitioner and you've been called in by an organization to go and assess their network, one of the first things that you'll be doing is scanning the same activities and the same flow that an attackers take. Is the same thing that is the same approach that we security practitioners take. Let me hold that thought. There's a question here. from Maureen, why do SSH and SFTP use the same port? Maureen, good question. SSH and SFTP, SSH is secure shell and SFTP is secure file transfer protocol. That is when you use tools like WinSCP and you want to connect to a remote server using SFTP, indeed, as you've said, Maureen, you will note that both of them will use port 22, and that is because port SSH by default uses port 22, but SFTP is actually FTP over SSH. So it's still FTP, but over SSH, and that's why by default, it uses port 22. I hope that answers your question, Maureen. Alvin, what is the difference between SFTP and FTPS? FTPS, SFTP, that is Secure File Transfer Protocol, and FTPS. FTPS is actually new for me. I'll need to check on that. Anyone who knows the difference between SFTP and FTPS, please share that. Would love to know on that one. Ntepe, all the way from Lesotho, you have a question. The good practice, is it to change these default ports or to make sure they are blocked or public? Now, what I would recommend here is, if you are, you definitely will need these services. But if the question is a good practice to change these default ports or make sure they are blocked for public, my response to that would be, if you have the default port as 23, please change it to the more secure version. So you don't want to use default legacy ports. Your legacy ports and legacy versions, which are by default vulnerable, you don't want to use those ones. You want to use SFTP rather than FTP. You want to be using SSH rather than use Telnet. You want to use HTTPS rather than use HTTP. Now, if you find that as well, now there is another level of security that you can even apply, where if you are using port 22 and you need to log into a server over the internet via port 22, as much as we are saying that port 22 is secure, there are also additional controls that you should put in place. For example, if you have just deployed a cloud server and it's running on port 22 so that you can log in and manage it, you can change that port so that instead of it being port 22, you can change it to a random number. So your port 22, your SSH configuration on your Linux server will allow you to do that. So that is one of the hardening practices that is recommended when you're setting up a Linux box before you deploy it for production. You don't want to have your port 22 as default port 22, so that it makes it harder for a hacker who is trying to scan your network to identify the default port. And for those of you who are joining in, who've just joined in, what we have on the screen is a live threat map by Radware. This is just a random live threat map I picked. There are a lot of them. I'm not doing any advert for Radware, but if you go online, you'll find the same for Checkpoint. You find the same for Fortinet. You'll find the same by Bitdefender. You find the same by Kaspersky. I like this one by Radware because, number one, it is good to look at. It is quite flashy. But on the left, you will note that I have deselected all the other options. And what I am currently selecting is scanners. So we've spent some time talking about scanning activity because it's interesting that when we uncheck the scanner and we enable intruders, you will note that the activity globally that is being detected by Radware sensors has gone down significantly. And what this tells us is there is a lot of scanning activity that is happening unawares. You have a cloud server on AWS, it's being scanned. You have a cloud server, you have an instance that is running on DigitalOcean, be assured it is being scanned. If that service is on the cloud, it's going to be scanned. So to respond to Ntepe's question, my recommendation is that if you have the default port, the default legacy, please change that to the more secure. But still, if you have the default like 22 that is secure, you can go ahead and even change the number, the port number. You can change the port number from 22 to maybe a 5960 or a random number. So an attacker, when an attacker finds the port number, it takes time for them to associate that with SSH. I mean, they will still do it, but you want to make it difficult for an attacker to find the default service that they want, or the vulnerable service that they want to exploit. All right. And very shortly, I'm going to bring in one Mr. Mompoloki. There were a few more questions. I want to respond to those questions. Please, if you have a question before we transition to our next section for the next couple of minutes, please do so. Bilha, welcome. You asked, can you use SCP instead of FTP? I'm not sure what SCP is. The protocol, if you don't mind, you can type SCP in full. But I'm aware, I know SFTP as the secure version of FTP. Bilha, I hope that answers your question. What do we mean, Charles? This is a question from Charles. What do you mean by a port being open? Think of it like you have a house and you don't want anyone going to that house. But the only way they can access it is if a window is open or a door is open. So that's what happens with our systems and applications. When an attacker wants to exploit or get data that is being hosted on a system being a server, they will look for open doors. And those open doors are what we are calling ports. When those ports are open, sometimes they're just wide open. You didn't even know it was open. So you built your good house and then you left the door open. So we don't want to do that with our applications and systems. We want to ensure that we've hardened them and we've closed everything that does not need to be open. Secure copy, that is SCP, that is secure copy. That I think is an option. Charles and Bill have thanks for that. I haven't come across secure copy, but seems to be an option that you can use. I'm not sure whether that is that an application or is that the service? There are applications that you can use and there's a service that runs behind it. But either way, I will need to do some research on that one. But seems from the word that secure copy is one that you can use to transfer. But the protocol itself, that is a secure version of FTP, is your secure FTP. All right. Please keep those questions coming if you have any. But for now, I want to welcome one Mr. Mompoloki. Mompo, are you here? All right, as we wait for Mompo, there are a few questions here. Charles, it's a command to securely copy files from a local machine to a server. Secure copy, all right. So allows you to copy files from one server to another. So the just note what you are appreciating on our left is that scanning activity forms the majority of attack types or attack activity. Every new application, every new server that you are spinning up on the cloud or you are exposing to the internet is being scanned. And that's why we have a lot of scanning activity. The questions we are trying to answer through our interactions that we've done for the last couple of minutes is, what are attackers looking for when they are doing all this scanning activity? And we have identified specific interesting and default ports that they will be looking for. And as they are doing this, we on the defense side, because you are the defender, you want to ensure that these ports and services that an attacker is looking for are not open by default. The reason we are talking about RDP, the reason we are talking about FTP, Telnet, is so that you have this information firsthand and you can prevent them from being exploited by ensuring that they are not running. So there's a question, pause and answer a question from Bethley. Just give me a minute. So there was a question from Bethley. There was a question from Bethley. Mompo, welcome. Welcome, Mompo. All right. So in a few minutes, I'm going to invite one Mr. Mompoloki, but there are a few questions that we were responding to. Bethley, are there situations where some ports need to remain open or they should all be closed? Not necessarily. There are scenarios where you can have your port as open, but it depends on what that port should be doing. So if of course you have set up a server or an application, and that application by default will need to use port 22, then it means that you definitely need that port 22 open. But what you can do is you can limit the number of people who are interacting with that port 22. That's a message that we are passing across. Besides, if you are not on the default and legacy ports, and services. The next phase is that you now need to look at defense in depth. How do you reduce the number of people or the number of devices that are connecting to your already running ports? So that would be my response on that question, Bethley. If you have any other questions, please keep them coming, and we will respond to that. Mompoloki, most welcome, sir. How is your evening?
It's a bit wild on the social side, of course. Hi,
Yeah,
Martin. Hi, everybody.
most welcome, Mompoloki. For those of you who everyone who is joined in Mompoloki, we've just been spending time to explore what attackers do, just looking at different activities that attackers are doing that is being captured by different live threat maps. And what we've been spending time appreciating is different ports and services that as security practitioners, we should configure for them to be open or closed, different legacy ports that we should disable, and their secure versions. And all this is in an effort to ensure that our applications, our systems are secure. So most welcome. Mompoloki, we are excited to spend the next couple of minutes just getting to learn from your expertise. And I want to, can everyone see and hear Mr. Mompoloki?
Hi, everybody.
Good. I believe we can hear you loud and clear. Perfect. So Mompoloki, it's been quite a journey. I mean, we've spent time, and I know how your journey has been, but I want to start by getting to understand and appreciate from you. And I'm going to stop the screen share, if you don't mind.
Cool.
I want to appreciate from your journey, Mompoloki. Did you always know that you would be doing things tech? Or did you just bump into tech?
As unbelievable, the weird thing about me and technology has always been I grew up in a very cultural family, right? And my grandfather more or less raised me and sort of was my inspiration, right? So to a large extent, I used to have it easy in terms of certain subjects. And at one point, he was like, you know what, dude, try commerce, try something around computers because it looks like it's gonna be the biggest thing in your generation. And you know what? I was like, okay, let me see what this computer thing has. And of course, fortunately or unfortunately, you know, when your journey is sort of geared up and channeled in a certain way, certain people start gravitating towards you. And most of the company I kept were guys that coincidentally at high school loved computers. And for somebody who grew up in a house without a computer, you could possibly imagine me going to varsity, deciding to do IT because my friends were like, let's try this. And I was like, yeah, my grandfather said I should try this. And walking into the first lab and feeling overwhelmed and rather intimidated. So I think I stumbled into this IT thing, honestly, and a bit of wise words from my grandfather and saying, challenge yourself with something slightly different from what everybody is doing at home. So yeah, that's generally how I bumped into this.
A lot of us who are joined in Mompoloki have different backgrounds. There are those of us who are joined in here who are looking to transition into cybersecurity. There are those who are in school in their third year, fourth years. Do you mind helping them appreciate who is Mompoloki? What do you do? How does your day look like right now?
Ooh, okay. Maybe to contextualize it for everybody, my name is Mompoloki. Everybody now has adopted the Mambo name. I think for Martin, it's Mambo, you know. So everybody has adopted the Mambo name. Mambo was quite common in my previous job where I did a bit of, a lot, not a bit, a lot of um, data center stuff. So Mompoloki basically is a technology enthusiast. I must say, when I put myself into something, I really soak myself in it. First and foremost, my journey started off from a consulting background where I did a lot of consulting for the guys who really mentored me, for lack of a better word. When I immediately left varsity, I had the fortune or misfortune, for those who feel misfortune, but fortune of falling into the hands of guys who really were passionate about technology, passionate about building the right stuff the right way, basically. So the first thing that they taught me, these gents taught me, was that never ever fear technology. That's the first thing. Gray matter is gray matter. Whether it's gray matter talking to the brain. Gray matter is gray matter. Whether it's Chinese gray matter, European gray matter, African gray matter, or American gray matter, it's gray matter. Your brain has the same neural circuits that anybody else's neural circuits has. And if you have the mind and the desire to learn, you'll create new pathways within your brain to do amazing things. Again, jumping into the weirdest thing that my mentor did to me the first week we met. He actually gave me a laptop, amazingly, gave me a laptop and says, this is a Windows 7. For those who don't know what Windows 7 is, it's the nicest operating system Microsoft has ever released. Anyway, before Windows 10. So he gives me a Windows 7 machine and he gives me a OpenSUSE Linux operating system installation media disk, right? So he tells me, surprisingly, I'm going to Nigeria for 1 week, Kenya another week, and then I'll be back. I want you to, when I return, I want to see this machine dual booting, the Windows 7 and the OpenSUSE operating system. Like, that's easy. First try, I wiped the whole operating system and the whole thing was OpenSUSE, and I was like, yeah, I'm in trouble. So I traveled 1, 2, 3 days later. I managed to get Windows 7 installed and booting Windows and OpenSUSE at the same time. So that was an achievement. Yeah, that's one. And then I call him. I just text him. I managed, and he's like, install VLC on the OpenSUSE distribution. I like VLC. I mean, think about it. It's an easy install. 2, 3 days later, I find a Windows emulator online and I install using Wine, or rather run the application using Wine. And I'm like, nah, he doesn't want it this way. And then I figured it out and I installed VLC on that box. And I actually kept the Wine installer as well to run other Windows applications on the OpenSUSE side of the machine. He comes back and I show him, and he's like, I never thought of running an emulator. Honestly, I never thought of running an emulator. I was like,
is that what Wine is?
Yeah, Windows. Wine is Windows emulator. It's like for those who've used Mobile Exterm as a terminal. It emulates Linux on Windows. So you can run Linux commands on Windows, but on a command line on Windows. Although limited, of course. And then what Wine would have did for me was, you know what? Not really like a VM. It's like for guys who've used, if you know what for guys who use Huawei, the newer Huawei, they don't have Google Play Store, right? You have GSpace. GSpace emulate or create a scratch space rather for running a type of Google Play Store. It actually plugs you into Google Play Store, and you install everything in that space that's Google Play Store based, and you're able to literally live off of that. It's really a type of scratch space. It's a type of environment. If you know environment variables, it creates an environment, a type of environment where you can run native commands or native applications within it, while removing the complexity of what you find in what's the operating system. So I did that. Well, after doing that, I did a visit to South Africa, I think 3 months down or 6 months down, Oracle Woodmead. Overwhelming, amazing feeling. You walk in there, guys, I'm a coffee guy, so first smell at Woodmead was coffee, and I was like, nice. Second thing I noticed, the servers running nice things, and I'm like, wow, this place, really nice. I attended a course on Oracle WebLogic, Oracle databases, real application clusters. It was amazing. It was a totally different experience from uni, actually, to be told.
So Mompoloki, you're saying this is how long? 6 months into your first job?
Yeah, 6 months into, literally 6 months into my first job.
So by that time, what could you do by 6 months?
Well, within 6 months, the initial, basically I could more or less navigate, truth be told, I could more or less navigate a Linux environment.
I see.
I was starting to notice the differences between a Debian-based Linux environment and a Red Hat-based Linux environment. It was annoying. I don't want to lie. It was annoying. I'm running an RPM on Debian and it's not working, or YAM on Debian, it's not working. I'm running an apt get on Red Hat and it's not working. So I was, for lack of a better word, you will learn this as you progress. You'll study after hitting the problem. Before the problem, a lot of us are just in there applying what we may think we know. And then you're like, Ash, let me go back to the manual study. So it's a very bad habit, guys. Don't adopt it. But if you can study, but for a large part of my career, a large part really, I've done a lot of trial, learned as I did, and read up on when I met challenges. So it made it easier for me to actually draw my own mind map and actually understand slightly in my own way when I studied, when I actually read. Unlike when I read and attempted. It was that approach worked, but it's slightly slower in getting you to learn stuff.
Is that an approach that you recommend to those of us who are joining Linux, who are learning?
Yeah, if you want to learn Linux, really, truth be told, Linux is all. The frightening thing about Linux, or the most enjoyable thing about Linux, is what everybody tells. There's no GUI. No, there is a GUI, guys. So you can actually use the GUI version or the desktop version of the Linux. Distribution. So you basically start observing during installations what is happening behind the scene. You can verbose and follow installations as they run. You can automate and basically, guys, Linux operating system literally allows you to do what is native for you. What feels natural for you is double clicking something and it runs, and you click next, and it's installed. That's on Windows. What Linux does and allows you to do is it actually allows you to follow the play-by-play as stuff is actually running, right? As stuff is installing. You'll see what the package is installing, what is interacting with, and you can actually stop it as and when you want to stop it, when you've verbosed a particular command, right? When you've verbosed or are following or tailing something. on the terminal. So I personally prefer Linux. I work with Windows, but I personally prefer Linux because it allows you to be more intimate with the application. It allows you to customize and do stuff that Windows may not allow you to do. Except worth noting and worth mentioning that the newer Windows environment, that is to say Windows 11, has tools that almost imitate and mimic somebody who's intimate with applications like myself, who doesn't mind getting their hands on the mud and actually saying, I want to run a shell command, I want to customize this shell to do this as opposed to doing that. And I want this application to behave this way as opposed to doing that. So Windows nowadays is more or less adopted an approach that has been the caveat for me for using Linux, really, or Unix, a Unix-based operating system. Yeah. So for a start, for guys who want to transition to Linux, it's okay to understand and have this understanding. It's an operating system. It basically allows you to interact with applications that are installed within the laptop or server infrastructure that you have. That's the first thing you need to have in the back of your mind. There's nothing really frightening or really special about Linux. It's just that for us crusty older guys, yeah, I look young, but I'm really old. Yeah. For us crusty older guys, or rather the crustier older guys before my generation, found it more appealing and more manageable from a troubleshooting point, and a whole lot of other things that were not possible with Windows distributions then. Nowadays, like I'm saying, we are seeing a lot of hybrid development on Windows that actually allows that modulation that was very, very common on a Linux distribution. So it's an operating system, guys. Don't fear. Just try. Download, install.
So Mompoloki, you transitioned from Linux. You started Linux heavily, and then you proceeded to server and infrastructure management. Walk us through that journey and down to the virtualization now as we're getting to the cloud side.
Oh, okay. So I did Unix administration for a while, or rather, I did Unix DBA for a while. On the Oracle platform, really. I think for some part I supported the e-business suite, which look, is amazing on Linux, and the exposure was amazing. And then I transitioned to Solaris 10, Solaris or Unix, or what we then called a Unix platform. Unix generally sits on, even Linux really, even the application we supported really sat on server hardware, server infrastructure, right? So from when you move and transition into Solaris environment, Solaris is more intimate with hardware. It's worth mentioning. It's more intimate with hardware. It's one of those operating systems I feel build the foundations for virtualization and cloud, honestly speaking, because containers really started off from logical domain started off from Solaris. So transitioning from server administration, Linux DB transition to server administration. With server administration, I moved into, we started seeing a move into VMware really, and Hyper-V. Truthfully speaking, virtualization in itself is a different beast, is a different world. You'll find that with different virtualization technologies, you find a sense of stability in certain types and certain advantages of using certain virtualization. If your concerns, for example, if you're running a Windows house, for example, it's safer to run on Hyper-V. Manage licenses far much better. If you're looking for robust, stable virtualization environment, I would generally recommend VMware. I've seen and I've worked with both Hyper-V and VMware. The developments on VMware are just amazing to achieve stability, to achieve all levels of virtualization, supporting any type of operating system where possible. I've worked also with Oracle's virtualization platform, OVM. It's like I said, depending on your use case, for guys who are cautious around the license on Microsoft, it's better to run it on the Microsoft virtualization platform. It allows you to have softer partitions in terms of your CPU and license allocation, as well as Oracle. It's better to run it on an Oracle virtualization platform. It's native, it's easier. Even when you're working with the support from the different ISVs. ISV meaning independent software vendor, Oracle, Microsoft, CloudStack, or K8, whichever. They find it a lot easier to assist and troubleshooting your problems when you are sitting on that platform, right? And even VMware will support as well. So VMware is agnostic of whatever you are running on. It will support everything, whether you are spinning up a machine and installing Oracle. It will run perfectly as if it's running on any other virtualization environment. The support there is amazing as well. So after transitioning to virtualization, the most challenging thing that I've seen personally wasn't transitioning from server infrastructure Unix to virtualization. It's actually transitioning from virtualization now to cloud. Remember, it's worth noting that the server abstraction or operating system abstraction was easier when you had these layers. When you install the operating system on a server, you're invariably abstracting the physical hardware and availing what you need from the hardware. This is CPU, memory, and storage, right?
Correct.
And then when you put virtualization on top of it, you're basically abstracting the hardware still and saying, let us have better use for our resources, and that we will create virtual machines. We'll spawn up individual operating systems within that single box with the virtualization software installed, operating system installed. So you start seeing server abstraction from virtualization and then operating system abstraction when you bring in virtualization. However, the complexity, the magic that came about with cloud is that you then abstract the virtualization platform and put a layer of cloud on top of that particular abstraction, virtualization abstraction. What cloud does, for all intents and purposes, you get better management of resources. Better management of resources in the sense that, one, you have the capability to build a multi-tenant environment. Multi-tenancy, picture, you have your own house, which is basically the house that you're staying in. And then think of it as a server with a visualization layer where you have your bedroom, your kids' room, or your mom's room if you're staying with your mom, and your sister's room. So you start having that. Now, when you bring in the cloud element of things, think of an apartment that has multiple rooms within it, right? A flat, as an example, which has 2 beds or something of that particular nature. So you have one structure or multiple structures that have multiple rooms within it, and a foyer to manage who goes into, who stays in what room, who stays in which room, right?
I see.
So the management of the estate is done from a single view. When you want people to go clean, you just call and you get people to go clean. If somebody needs something, they just call and you give them that particular, they call the front office basically. So taking it back to,
Is a property management element, is that where the cloud has come in now?
Generally, yes. Basically, yes. The property management and the ability to lease multiple rooms within that single structure. That's where the cloud element comes. It's worth noting, when you're running a private cloud infrastructure, best practice generally is to have this kind of setting. You want to have your cloud engineers taking care of your whole server infrastructure, as well as the cloud and any other supporting software, right? Per department, you may find that accounting has a specialized ICT personnel who speaks accounting, who understands the type of application systems that they have, and is actually able to accommodate and support those set of applications within an organization that has a private cloud. Same cuts across to all facets. So there's a lot in terms of when you are a software cloud guy, and or a software student, there's a lot in terms of what you can absorb and do when you start interfacing and understanding that you provide service to different departments. Cloud allows you to do that within a private cloud setup. For cloud service providers such as your AWS's, Azure, GCP, DigitalOcean, Huawei, they basically have servers that they've allowed different enterprises to lease compute resources from, basically. So whenever you are buying computer resources, you are basically leasing, for lack of a better word, a room that you're going to use for whatever it is that you want to use it for. Remember, I come with a family of 4, therefore I need a room, an apartment with 4 bedrooms and. Somebody comes in as a bachelor and they will choose a smaller apartment with a single room or studio within the same structure. So that allows you to actually customize and build your ICT infrastructure without necessarily investing on ICT infrastructure. You just pay for what you need as and when you need it. So when you need to increase what you have, you just pay for more and you get more, basically, in terms of the computing aspect. So that's that for me, transitioning again from a virtualization environment to a cloud environment. I was fighting the culture that I had actually built on the virtualization side, and understanding that we are no longer using just standard pod groups and standard distribution switches. Now we are using multi-tenant infrastructure as opposed to that and basically. So yeah, that's that to a larger, the long and short of it.
And thanks, Mompoloki. And for those of you who might not be in depth into the cloud, what Mompoloki has a very rich, I find you as a very rich journey, in that a lot of cloud practitioners, you'll find very few cloud practitioners who have had their journey starting from an infrastructure and actually building private clouds. And I find the journey of you starting from your Linux side and then virtualizing hardware and then building the private clouds. And actually, this is what Mompoloki was talking about. I've just done a quick visualization of this. So the house here, these are the resources that you want to access, you want to have access to. But here we have the cloud software that Mompoloki was talking about that helps you through the admin interfaces, allows you to access different resources without worrying whether a house is available or a room is available. And I like that analogy. So Mompoloki, what I find very interesting is your journey from virtualizing, and then you've talked about a layer that you build on top of the virtualization to now build a private cloud. Now, how does that now look from a public cloud? What normally changes? What do you find is a big change when you look at the private cloud? And the private cloud is where you have built your private cloud on top of VMware servers. And then how does that look like when you now shift to public cloud? And if you can also talk a little bit about the security part of it, what do we need to be concerned about? And what are some of the misconceptions that you have come across for people who are deploying applications on the public cloud? The public cloud here being your AWSs, your GCPs, and your Azures and the like.
Thanks again for that very complicated question, Martin. Can I share my screen for a sec?
Please do.
Yes. I'm gonna try something weird. Am I sharing? Are you seeing my screen?
Not yet.
Share the whole thing. Okay, you're seeing my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
A sec, let me see who's there.
And as Mompoloki is sharing his screen, if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please just write them on chat and we'll get to respond to the questions.
So generally what IT infrastructure looks like, right? Server. I have a very horrible handwriting. Network. Storage. Some type of OS or virtualization. So what you will have is you'll have servers, possibly with some networking device. So one thing I've learned from the networking guys is if you don't draw it right, they will harass you. And then some type of storage device. What you may have something like this.
So that's your server connecting to the network layer, connecting to the storage layer.
So you have network.
Right.
Storage. Then you have some other. Then network here. Then
What's the red?
I'll explain. Just give me a sec. We have firewall for network. So this is basically generally what you may have in terms of physical infrastructure, right? You will have some firewall layer, which is the security side, the network layer, which is more or less the networking. You'll have the server layer, network, and storage devices for different storage purposes. Of course, for guys who are interested in things like BCM, business continuity, you may have something like this as well. Yeah. Your backup server. Right.
All right.
All of this is generally duplicated to some type of disaster recovery configuration. So what you will have, if you look at this particular drawing, it speaks to generally what you would have on a typical server environment. When you walk into Access Bank, for example, they will have not exactly this, but the thinking is more or less that you'll have storage devices connecting to send switches connecting to servers. Send switches are specialized switches for transmitting information from servers and applications to right to your storage at real time. And then you'll have top of the rack server switches that basically provide service to your client in the network. You'll of course have core switches that then begin to transmit data to your customers that are sitting on other branches, right? You'll have a switch at the branch one, connecting to using some MPLS technology, some net internet technology setup that allows you to then connect to that particular core switch to access this particular result. So I'm building out this particular architecture for the question you asked, Martin, right?
Yeah.
It's not the most cleanest, the most accurate architecture, but it's the most basic building block when it comes to actually building your server infrastructure or following at least a well-architected framework, for lack of a better word, right? So you'll have something of this particular nature off the bat. When you start virtualizing, you are basically abstracting all of these, the server, and saying to we'll come back to it. Come back to it. So you never need it. So basically, you're abstracting all of that junk and giving administrators CPU, memory, what is known as RAM, and then storage. And then all of this, of course, on an OS. When you virtualize, you're basically giving somebody an operating system with some type of CPU for the application is going to install some capacity in terms of RAM, 2 GB as an example, and some storage to run the operating system and the application, right? Storage.
I see. Okay.
Right. So that's generally what you will get from a virtualization setup. Now, when you then move slightly deeper and more intimately, you start seeing things like the virtualization or VM console disappearing, and you're having a layer of cloud. What cloud then allows the cloud service provider is they will have that estate of server, storage, and network, and giving you a marketplace or a shopping center to buy CPU, memory, and storage, and networking. Networking as well. I forgot networking. I keep forgetting networking. So the thing about this is you then form part of a pool on the public cloud of resources.
Yeah.
Remember that tenant allocation. You're going to buy some resources, being CPU, memory, storage, and some networking, which you need. And somebody else is going to buy some resources as well, which they need. And somebody else is going to buy some networking, some resources as well, for whatever it is they need it for.
Yeah.
Somebody may put a web application. Some may put a website.
Yeah.
Someone may put a private cloud application, a billing platform,
Okay.
right? For whatever purpose. Remember, the requirements vary, and these are owned by individuals that are going to install the application in their respected scratch spaces or environment in the cloud.
Okay.
So when you go to the cloud console, you are getting access to saying to the cloud management software, provision and create resources for me to create an application that is web-based using these resources, basically, using the resources that I need, the CPU, the memory, and the storage plus network for all intents and purposes. However, it is also worth noting that when it comes to the accessibility and access of this, it is on me who owns the software asset or the application that is deployed on the public cloud to secure.
To secure it, okay.
This is to say, yes, this is to say user creation is on me. Password sharing is on me, right?
Yeah.
Things like access ports or service ports, protection is on me. What the cloud service provider will ensure you have as a customer who uses their cloud environment is that
yes,
from the physical hardware side, this is to say the server, storage, physical network devices, the operating system, the virtualization platform, plus the cloud platform is maintained by the cloud service provider, depending on the type of service that you are looking for. There are, of course, instances, guys, where one may buy platform as a service. Platform invariably means that we don't care about servers and VMs and operating system and the sort and. However, I'm interested in getting an application that I'm deploying, plugging into a database that the cloud service provider is providing. So the responsibilities between myself and the cloud service provider falls off depending on the type of service I'm buying. Remember, the service models are generally infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, just by way of contextualizing, and then software as a service. There's a lot of renditions that have come out of the software as a service. You started getting databases as a service and other things, renditions from this as well. But generally, when somebody is talking about infrastructure as a service, you're more or less looking at guys who don't mind system administration. System administration meaning operating system administration, installing your own operating system, hardening your operating system, controlling the access. Hardening basically means closing it off from people who can access on applications that can access, saying only this particular set of applications can access this server. That's basically hardening your operating system. And then for guys who are more on the development side, this is to say guys who are intimate about development more than worrying about CPU, memory, storage, and the sort. they would naturally gravitate towards your platform as a service, where you start looking at microservices architecture, APIs, and Kubernetes, containers, and the sort. So you start looking at guys who would pop into a cloud service provider and say, I'm looking for a database as a service and a K8 cluster for deploying microservices on the cloud. So, and then for software as a service guys, those are your guys who really want to just consume a particular service. If the internet is there, I can access my email. Gmail is a typical example. Microsoft's own Outlook is a typical example. Your suite of applications on Google are also sort of examples that you can use as software as a service. I mean, your mobility tools really. Mobility tools meaning your Microsoft Office on the cloud, Office 365 on the cloud, and any other mobility tool that's sitting on the other cloud service provider. So generally, in terms of from a security point, it's worth noting that the security is shared in this regard. The physical infrastructure, supporting infrastructure, is generally the responsibility of the cloud service provider. That's AWS's problem. They will patch the hardware. They will patch the operating system that is installed on the hardware. They will patch the firmwares and everything. You don't need to worry about that. However, if you look into procuring infrastructure as a service, the virtual machine that you would have spun up on the cloud, that's your baby. You need to apply patches and updates on it. You need to install your antivirus. You then need to control the access to that particular machine. You need to have in your mind, I want Martin to access this machine. However, I do not want Mambo to access the very same machine. Even if we are working in the same organization, you can actually intimately control access to that depth. Platform as a service again. You start looking at database patching, database management, database upgrade. That becomes the responsibility of the cloud service provider. However, the application that you are deploying on the K8, on the Kubernetes cluster that you would have procured, that becomes your responsibility. You are responsible for the package update. But the cloud service provider in themselves will take care of all the other updates all the way up to the platform itself. If it's a Kubernetes cluster, they will patch the Kubernetes cluster. If it's a database cluster, they will patch the database cluster. So same applies to software as a service. They take care of the whole estate. The only thing you need to worry about is if you've paid your internet bill, and then you can connect your Google. I've never heard of Gmail being down in the several years that I've lived so far. So it's something that I'm waiting to see happening if it ever happens. So that's generally what from a security point, sharing the shared responsibility model that you find when you go into the cloud.
Thank you very much, Mompoloki. That was actually a crash course on cloud for beginners, and it was you've done it very well. And just a recap, my takeaways from this is you've really helped us to appreciate the transition from private cloud, and some of us, the cloud that we know is our VMbox, VirtualBox, and that then transitions to a VMware. And then now the transition between VMware or Hyper-Vs into us using AWS, you've really helped us to have that transition in knowing that there is a cloud management console that now sits before the users and is able to give you an opportunity to buy CPU, buy computing, buy memory. And also, you've talked about the service models as well: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And for those of us who want to explore some more on that, please do. the correlation between that and what Mompo has shared with us on the shared responsibility from a security point, which is what I want us to wrap up with. And as they say, the security of the cloud is the responsibility of the cloud provider. The responsibility in the cloud is your responsibility as a person who is buying resources in the cloud. So that was superb, Mompo. I don't know whether there are any questions. I know we are way beyond time. I don't know whether there are any questions for those of us who are still joined in as we are wrapping up. Mompo, as we're getting some questions on chat, I would like you to help us with a quick takeaways. What do we expect on the cloud? What are the trends that we are seeing right now? And also a fun fact for you, what will you be doing if you are not in tech? What career would you be in? Let's save that for last. Help us appreciate what are the trends that we are seeing.
All right. So guys, the biggest trend that's coming up now, and I say this with, I don't know, yeah. Anyway, the biggest trend that's coming up now is AI. Somebody might say, but AI has been there. It's been there. However, the adoption of AI into day-to-day business and day-to-day operations is taking up. There are a lot of use cases on the different verticals, different sectors in the world, basically. AI use cases in the medical health is very different from AI use cases in the mining sector. So AI is coming up, and there's a huge explosion of artificial intelligence, machine learning. And it's worth, and I recommend guys taking that up. There's of course stuff coming up in the fintech space, which most companies, organizations now have bundled up into what they call their digital strategy. I mean, cloud adoption is part and parcel of all organizations' digital strategies. On top of the cloud, you start looking at machine learning, you start looking at AI, you start looking at blockchain, you start looking at things like fintech, depending on the type of business you're looking into. Okay. Look, traditional server administration is never going to die. However, how we do it will change drastically with tools that are coming out there.
As a result of AI?
Yeah, as a result of AI, really.
I see. Okay. So that's one of the things. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
It's amazing the type of things you can do now with artificial intelligence and machine learning.
I see.
Really. Yeah.
Okay.
It's amazing.
There is a question from Maureen on the best practices on security in the cloud. And I'm saying we only have a very few minutes on that. And I know part of that is what you've talked us through, the shared responsibility. There's also another question from Anthony. And Maureen, if you don't mind, allow us to follow that through on inbox on that. Anthony, I don't think this has been handled. Mompo, maybe you can respond to this one. For someone without infra background, you don't have an infrastructure background, but you want to pursue a career in cloud security, is there anything they can do?
Look, I'm gonna be honest. A lot of the security engineers that organizations I've been interacting with have started asking me to do security recently, looking at possibly the infra knowledge and experience I have. Mm-hmm. And often at times, look, I often say this. Administration and securing assets within an organization is a team effort. You as a security or cloud security engineer need to then lean on the knowledge of an infra guy. The kidney is not more important than the heart, nor is the heart more important than the kidney in the structure of the body. However, the harmony between the two organs ensures a good balance within the body for optimal function of the whole person, right? A good balance and a good harmony. So
Correct.
always approach, and I say this to everyone, always approach the workplace, the tech space with an open mind to lean on somebody's knowledge and apply it in improving your ability to serve. The first thing that you need to always have is a service mentality to serve, number one. Two, as I serve the security guys, they serve me by protecting me. There will be other things that I may not be looking at as a traditional infra cloud guy, and they would come in with a vast well of knowledge in terms of the security best practice and security framework. I then translate that and share a bit of what happens on the infra side, thereby making a harmonious exchange of knowledge. They will gain knowledge on the infra side now, infrastructure stuff, work, and how to secure using what they know. They then share. I think that's generally what happened with me and Martin when we first interacted. He shared a lot of security insights. I shared a lot of infrastructure insights, and it was easy for us to actually gel in and assist each other in achieving the service to the organization we were working for at that time. So it's imperative, it's important. Be a team player. Have an open mind. Don't shy away from asking questions where you don't understand personally. And don't shy away from learning the fundamentals of infrastructure build. There are short courses on Udemy. It's okay. It's important to also have a mentor if you can on different facets. I have those. I have mentors on cybersecurity. I have mentors on database administration. I have mentors across the industry, across the ICT landscape, really. So with Martin being a friend, and I regard him as a mentor as well. He doesn't know that, but don't tell him. So yeah. So that's generally
thank you very much.
How I approach things.
Thank you.
And then to your question, or should I answer some of those questions as well?
No, let me, because of time, I just want to wrap up on the two. And please note, there's a comment that Mompoloki has made on service. You approach your job responsibilities as a service. And especially in the tech area, that is, I would say it's golden advice. When whichever domain you're in cyber or in tech, serve your talent or your skill to other people, and that's how it grows. Just a quick wrap up. Anthony, I hope that has been helpful to you. I don't think there is a way you can avoid having infrastructure background if you are going to get into cloud security. The closest you can get, if you feel that tech is a struggle, and I mean the tech, and I mean it's getting into the hands-on, you can try explore the audit part of it. The audit means that you're looking at the compliance, the standards, which the depth that you need to do from a tech will be limited, but then you will also need to rely on people who are good on the tech side, on the cloud infrastructure, but that's a path that you can explore. But don't close off on getting deep into tech, into infra. It might be just a question of exposure or the environment that you have, or the resources, or mentors, but don't lock that out. Samuel, you have also asked a question on what advice would you give somebody who is already into networks and wants to get into cyber? Where do you start from? I mean, look at Mompo. You become so good at what you do until security is the next life for you. So that's the way I look at it. The best security people are very good engineers. So if you are the network engineer, you just need to look at, how do I secure? You can't secure what you do not understand. You can't break what you don't understand. And don't be intimidated by people who pick tools and they begin scanning and exploiting infrastructure. I mean, until you sit down with somebody who can tell you the fundamentals of how a server works, how the kernel works, or how the network works, how protocol works, how Kerberos protocols work, those are the people you spend time with. If you have the fundamentals right, don't be worried about the security. Security, again, is just a question of find the right people who are into that space, attend webinars, platforms like we are doing, because they begin triggering the right questions to ask about how to secure or how to break. But I would really ask that you focus on the fundamentals, the engineering bit, the infrastructure bit, if you're going to become a good security engineer. Mompoloki, I know we've gone way beyond. And guys, for those of you who are still joined in, thank you very much for staying in. And it was a very insightful session for me. I am always learning when I meet Mompoloki, always learning. And it's been like more than 6 years that we've known each other, but it's always learning. And thank you so much, Mompoloki, for sharing great insights to us. If you don't mind, you can also share contact information, Mompo, on chat that you'd like anyone of the those of us joining to reach out to you.
I think, okay, for guys who are possibly looking for me on LinkedIn, just look for Mompoloki Gaotlolwe on LinkedIn. Apparently, the new guys called those my handle. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn.
There we go.
Also, what's that?
So as Mompoloki shares his contacts, please feel free to reach out. This is one of the mentors that can guide you on anything infrastructure. You can take that to the bank. So Alvin, Anthony, yeah.
In my next life, guys, I'm going to be a chef.
You're going to be a chef. Oh, you are to answer that. You're going to be a chef. Are you going to be a chef or are you a chef?
I think I do well in the kitchen.
All right.
I do well enough. I don't know how to bake yet, but I do quite well with spices and stuff. So
all right.
Non-spicy food as well. In my next life, I'm gonna
You'll
do
be a
that
chef.
job.
All right.
You know that guy with the thing. I'm gonna do that thing.
I see. Thanks so much, Mompoloki, and to every one of us who was joined in. It was a pleasure. Vincent, Ozoku, I think that is all the way from Nigeria, Ntepe from Lesotho, Shaun, Samuel, Paul, Monica, Oscar, Maureen, this is your space, AWS Cloud. I hope this has been very insightful. The Bohang, right here in Gabs, thank you for joining in. Fidel, Fatal, Colin, Charles, Bethley, Anthony, Alvin. Thank you so much, guys, for staying in. I hope this has been insightful and we continue learning. Till the next webinar, keep learning. Thank you. Bye-bye.